Today, you're going to be talking about populations, samples, and generalizing from a sample to a population. Most of what you're doing today, you'll do with a partner. But before I can let you work on your own, we need to define population and sample. Take a look at the table on your paper. The population, that's the whole group that you're talking about. The sample is part of that group. So in other words, what we're saying is that we have a big group Everyone, let's talk about people for now. That's our population. But sometimes it's not practical to take everyone into account. For example, if I was talking about everyone at Boynton, because I wanted to have an ice cream party, and I said, hey, what's your favorite ice cream flavor? It would take me a long time to gather all that information. So I don't really want to do that. That's why I take a sample. There are good samples and there are bad samples. So right now, what you need to know is that the sample, that's just the people that you are asking. So maybe if I wanted to know everyone at Boynton and their favorite ice cream flavor, I would just ask only my students. There are 6 math teachers in the school, and I'm one of them, so you can assume that I'm asking about 1/6 of the total population. That would be one way to take a sample. So the perk of doing this is that I can get information that represents everyone, but I don't have to actually go through the trouble of talking to everyone. All right? Now, we can talk about good samples and bad samples, and in fact, I'll put a second video on here after this one to talk about the differences between good samples and bad samples. But what you need to know right now is that everyone is in the population, and the sample is just a small portion of the population. So it would be helpful if I was figuring out what everyone's favorite ice cream flavor was, because I wouldn't have to ask everyone. Let's look at the other examples on your worksheet. If my population is a pot of soup, well, that's weird. Usually we think about population representing people, but we can think of our population being a pot of soup. Maybe I want to make sure there's enough salt in my soup. I don't want to eat the whole pot of soup to make sure that there's enough salt, right? I would then have nothing left for dinner. I'd also probably be really full. So even though I could taste the entire pot of soup and then decide, a better way would be to go in and just take 1 teaspoon of soup and say, okay, this is like all the soup mixed up. This is about what the whole thing's going to taste like. Is it salty enough? So the sample would be the teaspoon, and it would represent the whole pot of soup, even though if we didn't try the whole thing. The next example, the population, could be all batteries of a certain brand. So I could be saying, hey, I want to know, do Duracell batteries last more than 4 months when I use them? And I use them most when I'm using my Enoboard pen. So I could say, I'll test them on my Enoboard pen, but I want to know, do they last more than 4 months overall? So all of the batteries of this brand would be my population. I'm not testing all of the batteries of that brand. That would be impractical. I don't want to buy every Duracell battery ever. I'm just going to test the ones that I use in my Enoboard pen. Now, some of these are good ways to sample and some of these are bad ways to sample. What I want you to do right now is, with a partner, take a look at number 1. Number 1 says collecting data. With your partner, brainstorm ways to collect data in order to answer each of the following questions. You're not allowed to say Google it or look it up online or ask someone. I want you to think, what could I do to answer this question? We've kind of already talked about the first one, so just to give you an idea, does the soup taste good? You could taste some of the soup. And determine if it tastes good. All right, so with your partner, you're first going to answer these questions. Then when you're done with that, you're going to take a look at number 2. For each question above, determine whether you would collect data from the whole population or just a sample. Write P or S for population and sample to the right of each row. So depending on how you're going to answer the question, you should determine if you need to find data from the whole population or the sample. Please work on this with one partner. When you're done with that, flip on to the next page and continue on this worksheet with a partner.